talking about something that is near and dear to my heart and not always the easiest thing to actually do and implement, and that is rest. Don't fall asleep on me. That is not the point of this message. I will come down there and wake you up. How many of you, by showing raised hands, could use a rest? And how many of you couldn't even get your arm up? Just put your head down. You know that there is actually a report that says that in the year 2020, it's expected that in America alone, we will spend $52 billion on sleep products. That's a lot of money, just so we can sleep. And I think that there are more statistics that I've read that were talking about how we work a month longer than those in Japan. This is kind of an older statistic, but it's the most recent one I could find. It was 2015. We also work 3 months longer than in Germany. I find that hard to believe, but you know what? They do take a break in the middle of the day, and maybe that's why. We're just continuing to press on right through that siesta, right? And we as Americans find great pride in this fact that we don't rest, and we are so busy because we are so important, right? Not really. We're just dumb. And so I am going to be encouraging you today not to take a nap, not to take a vacation. We're going to be talking about supernatural rest and what the difference is, right? Did you know that there is an American Institute of Stress? Doesn't that sound amazing? Where do you work? I work at the American Institute of Stress. Everyone will clear the house, move away from you. The whole idea is to learn to manage stress, to learn to, let's study stress and how it affects us in our mental health and our physical health and all these things. And there's a whole institute about it, and you can go there and find all kinds of ways to manage your stress. And yet, we are still so stressed. Just reading that and seeing that website made me stressed. That word, saying it out loud, literally, if my kids are saying that over and over, they're adults, by the way. But when they come to me and they say many times how stressed they are, I'm like, do not say that word around me. It's just triggering all kinds of things in my brain and my body that just goes haywire. Not that Sydney would ever do that last night when I'm preparing a message on rest. She's about to go to college Thursday, so this is her last Sunday, and she's not stressed. She's at peace and rest in the Lord. But anyway, so we understand that we have a challenge, and that is that we are learning what it means to find rest. And it is not the kind of rest that any vacation will cure. Have you ever taken a vacation intending to rest, and then you come home and you are exhausted and you have to go back to work and you need a break from your break, rest from your rest that wasn't really rest? All of us can identify with that, right? And so it's interesting that in this American Institute of Stress began in none other than New York City. Obviously, it's a great place to start, right? But guess where they are now? That was in 1978. Who knew that in 1978 anybody was stressed? Had they only known what was coming? But in 1978, they started in New York, and now they're down in Fort Worth, Texas, where it's very much slower and kinder, gentler state, right? It's just a softer, gentler place to live. There's more rest down there. Now, if you live down there, you're probably feeling like we feel here, but we know what it really is to be in traffic and all that drama. But from the American Institute of Stress, I found this information. It says in New York and Los Angeles and other cities around the United States, but mostly these are the two they're talking about, the relationship between job stress and heart attacks is so well acknowledged that any police officer who suffers a coronary event on or off the job is assumed to have a work-related injury and is compensated accordingly, including heart attacks sustained while fishing, on vacation, or gambling in Las Vegas. It's not because you're gambling all your money away, it's because you're a police officer and we will pay you accordingly if you have a heart attack. That's pretty crazy and pretty amazing that we carry that kind of stress so much that there have been studies that will associate our physical health with this kind of stress and a lack of rest. The Mayo Clinic has a whole list of ways to manage your stress. Are you ready? Don't even write it down because I'm going to give you a cure for it, and none of this stuff can do it because you probably tried it. Exercise more. I know that's good for you. It's so hard to get there, and if we could all just do that, we still won't be rested. Right? Am I right? Thank you. And also eat better. Have a healthier diet. Avoid unhealthy habits. Less caffeine, alcohol, no drugs, just less. You'll do better. Meditate. Laugh more. Connect with others face to face. Assert yourself. Learn to say no. Only when it's appropriate, because then your boss will say, don't say no, and then you'll be stressed again. Breathing exercises. Breathe. Just breathe right through it. Everything will just be at peace. Tried that. Get enough sleep. Be creative. Keep a journal. That'll do it. Seek counseling. Talk to somebody. Process it out. Have you processed things out so much that you're just like, I'm so stressed from processing? Really, we do this to ourselves, and we think, because we all just try to go inside ourselves. We're trained in this society. If you do any kind of meditation with a less than Christ-centered organization, for lack of a better term, let's say we're doing yoga, or we're doing Pilates, or, just imagine with me for a moment the color blue. And we try to do this, and we just go inside of ourselves, and we just empty ourselves of everything, and it works for kind of just a minute. But when we become the center, we are the end of ourselves. There's nothing more. We cannot be the source and the resource. And spend it, and give it, and spend it, and give it, and take it. What? So we have to have a source that doesn't run dry, who can then replenish us, rest, restore, to store up again. And so let's talk about what is a cure for rest that no nap, no amount of sleep, and no vacation can help. There's a cure. Are you ready for it? Get your notebooks out, people. Matthew 11. So Pastor's been going through the book of Matthew as a series. And within keeping, I am staying in the book of Matthew, but I am skipping John the Baptist and leaving that for Pastor Bill. Because I was more inspired by the end of the chapter, which is chapter 11, verse 28 through 30. And I'm reading through the NIV. It says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy and my burden is light." I love what Charles Hayden Spurgeon said, and he explained it so well. And before I say that, I have literally said to Bill many times, and I think I'm doing him such a favor, Bill, no one can give you rest. You need to take it. No one can say no for you, and no one can rest for you. You have to stop and take it. While that's true and kind of encouraging, maybe, it's not what the Bible says. And I was very convicted as I was studying for this message and realizing, oh, no wonder it doesn't work to take rest and get sleep, right? Because the Bible says, come to me. Our job is to come to Jesus. And Charles Hayden Spurgeon, who Pastor has taught us is the greatest pastor of all time, so I thought, well, let's see what he has to say about this verse. And it was so interesting because he talks about how it is that when it comes to money and getting ahead, we completely get it. We are individual personalities, and we are ready to get the prize and win. We get it. Like, I will personally take this on, and I will figure out the way to get to where I want to be. I'm setting goals for this year, 3 years from now, 5 years, and 10 years, and ultimately, this is where I will be, and we achieve it. But we don't really have a clear understanding of what it really means when it comes to eternal things. And I love how he said it, so I will quote him. He said, "I find that often in the matter of eternal things, men seem to lose themselves in a crowd and they think of the blessings of grace as a sort of general shower that may fall on the fields of all alike. They do not especially look for the rain upon their own plot or wish to obtain a blessing for themselves. Now then, you who are heavy laden, wake up. Where are you? The call of the text is not to your sister, your mother, your husband, your brother, your friend, but to you. Come to me, Jesus, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Isn't that amazing that if we stop and realize that Jesus is saying, come to me, he's actually a person who is divine. He's not saying, come to a concept of me, come to the philosophy of me, come to a theory that may, if you do this, then this will happen. He is Jesus, your Savior, the one who is your source of rest. And he promises that if we will come to him, he will give us rest. And so what a promise that is. It's not sleep he promises rest for your soul. What is your soul? Your soul is your mind and your emotions. That's very different from rest for your body. Because you know what? If your body begins to break down, probably before that, your soul was already broken down. Have you ever had someone say to you, and I've had it more than once, my job is a soul-sucking place of whatever. And literally, they're just like, you can see they're totally burned out, like the end, done with it. But they're going back tomorrow, Monday. So if you're in that soul-sucking place where it's just, I'm so emotionally tired and I'm so done, your job is to come to Jesus. Your job is to yoke up with Jesus. The yoke, you've heard of the oxen with the wooden plank that connects the two oxen, and then they're bound together to plow together. It doesn't mean we rest and there is no more work. It's just wonderful, peaceful, nothing to do. No, it's saying that you will work so much better because you are yoked up to a stronger oxen who is Jesus, who is going to plow and do the heavy lifting while you go along for the ride because he's stronger than you. You don't carry the burden because his burden is light. His yoke is light, his burden is easy, whatever it is. I always mix those two things up. But so we understand that we're coming up with Jesus and he's giving us rest. He's like, let me carry that for you. That is way too much for you to carry. So your job is to come to him. His job is to give you rest. And then secondly, I want to read to you, or actually not secondly, I'm not going to count through this whole sermon, don't worry. But Taylor, our daughter, was telling me about this poem that she learned in school. And I remember when she learned it and was talking to me about it because it was so really ministering to her. And it's called The Pulley. Well, I started off way wrong because I thought she was saying the bully. And so if you know me at all, this just all makes sense. But I was just really struggling hearing this poem because I thought, God is not a bully. And so I'm trying to understand it. Well, then when I understood, a pulley is the name of this poem. And a pulley is the idea and the concept that you pull down on something to lift up something else, right? So like picture a well. You're going to pull on something and it's going to lift up the water in the bucket. And so let me read this to you. It's written by George Herbert in the 1600s. And he is an Anglican priest, a man of God, and he obviously went through some things in his life. And bear with me, it's going to challenge you. If you are a charismatic in theology, you're just going to be challenged all over the place, but we're going to go together and just breathe through it. It's going to be okay. Come to Jesus and rest. But I want to read this to you because it did minister to me and does minister to me, and it helps me to understand some things even a little bit better. It is not the Bible, but it is encouraging for you. So let me just read it to you. And you'll be able to see it for those of you that are like me and have to read it yourself to understand it. When God at first made man, having a glass of blessings standing by, let us, said he, pour on him all we can. Let the world's riches, which dispersed lie, contract into a span. So strength first made a way, then beauty flowed, then wisdom, honor, pleasure. When almost all was out, God made a stay, perceiving that, alone of all his treasure, rest in the bottom lay. For if I should, said he, bestow this jewel also on my creature, he would adore my gifts instead of me, and rest in nature, not the God of nature. So both should losers be. Yet let him keep the rest, but keep them with repining restlessness. Let him be rich and weary, that at least, if goodness lead him not, yet weariness may toss him to my breast. And the whole concept there is that God has poured out so many blessings upon us. And one of the things that he says that we need to go to him for, directly to him, he has not already bestowed it upon us, he has not already given us what we need for the rest of our lives, that is rest. And you know, we just saw in the news yesterday, and maybe some of you saw it, but, and I won't mention the name because I don't want to be callous with just a sermon illustration here, but there's an individual who had billions of dollars, and he came to the end of himself. He had made a lot of choices in his life. He just wasn't satisfied. He could have anything he wanted, like King Solomon. You know, he had all the wisdom and all the riches he wanted, and yet he did not deny himself anything, and he lost his mind. Well, this is what this man did, and he gave up his own life, in the end having nothing. And I wonder if there's this sense that if we can just, you know, all the riches and all the beauty and all the stuff, all the power, but if you don't have rest, you can't sustain that. You can't hold that. You can't hang on to that because you're not meant to. You're meant to be doing all the things that you do for a greater purpose. And by the way, your identity is not found in what you do. It's found in who you are and whose you are, right? So I'm going to read to you from Psalm 23. It's a very familiar chapter to you. You know it by heart. But I'm going to read it and maybe read it a different way from how we're used to it. Jesus speaks of himself in John 10 as the good shepherd. Remember where he talks about how my sheep hear my voice and they know it and all of those things. Well, this is also God being our shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. His job is that he makes you lie down. He leads you. He refreshes you. He guides you. He restores you. He prepares a table for you. He anoints your head. He does all that part. We think we have to do all that and then rest somehow. But he does that. He leads you to a place of rest. And you know what our job is? To dwell in the house of the Lord. That means to come back to and abide in the house of the Lord. And so you're doing that right here, right now, coming into the house of the Lord, which is the church. And then also, it's to abide in his presence every day. Allow him to lead you to a place of rest. And I'm not talking about sleep, as we've already talked about, but let him lead you beside still waters. That's the Spirit of God. He will restore, again, it says, your soul. So there is a key to having our minds and our emotions restored and rested and healthy. Because if you get rested and healthy in your mind and your emotions, your physical body will do so much better, right? Any doctors in the house? I think we could confirm that through science. Anyway, so that's in Psalm 23. So beautiful. I love the visual, and sometimes just meditate on that. Just picture Jesus being your good shepherd and making you lie down in green pastures. Like, lay down, sheep. Do it right here. You know, he leads you. Come on, let's go to the water, fresh water. You need it. You know, he's going to do that and because he loves you. Another scripture, Isaiah 40:29-31. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases strength. Even youth shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. What is his job? He gives power to the faint. Have you ever fainted? How many of you have you ever fainted or lost consciousness without your control? Anyone? I need your hands really high because I need some support here. Okay, so I have fainted. I'm going to tell you just a quick story about it. Taylor and I were at an Airbnb, and we were going to an appointment early in the morning, and so we were leaving a little bit early to make sure that we could get there. And I was seeing Taylor go down the stairs and saw that she kind of bounced off the bottom step, so I thought to myself, oh, I need to be careful on that bottom step. I get down there, and I'm being careful. I didn't realize, I thought it was going to be a deeper step, so I was prepared for deeper. It was shorter. So I stepped right on the edge of it as like a cinder block, twisted my ankle, and fell all the way to the ground, crashing with all my bags and everything very dramatically. And then on the way down, I'm yelling, oh, my ankle, because it hurts so bad. So I'm trying to move my ankle, make sure it's not broken, which it was not. And then I was like, we've got to get to this appointment. So I kept trying to get up. So finally I get up, but it is hurting so bad, and it's my driving foot. And I'm trying to breathe through it. I'm trying to picture myself not feeling dizzy and not feeling pain. And I was so dizzy, I decided to lean up against the car because it's all I could do. And Taylor is saying, Mom, get in the car, because she was worried about me. And I'm like, I can't move. So I then begin to, this is told to me because I don't recall this happening. I just remember feeling this amazing peace. So restful and calm. And actually, I was passing out. So I'm passing out onto Taylor, who is catching me with her knee onto the gravel ground. And then I'm laying on this gravel ground. There's just chaos going all around me as she's trying to help me and get help and all these things. And I just remember feeling like this extreme sense of rest and calm and peace. Taylor was not feeling all those things. She's yelling to me, Mom, do not get up, because I guess I kept trying to get up and passing out again. So I passed out twice on her. And so she's like, just lay on the ground, lay right where you are. So I'm waking up to her yelling at me. I'm like, why is she yelling at me, and where am I? And she said later, I was not yelling, I was just speaking sternly. And so I just remember thinking, this is the best nap ever, on the gravel ground with my head on a brick. And it was just this sense of total peace. So I thought, if this is what it's like to die, I am not afraid. This is amazing. It really is. It actually did take away a fear of dying to me. And so I know that sounds very morbid and weird, but actually that's a deal. That's a really good thing for me. But what I also, someone in the last service was talking about how they're a nurse, and they were saying how they were just talking about this last week, about how it is that when we go into shock, or we have, which is probably what I was doing from the pain, because my pain tolerance is just so high. But it's that everything shuts down so that only the most important things actually work, and that your brain is the final thing to, lose consciousness and whatever. I don't even know. All I know is everything definitely slowed down. And I thought about how that is a correlation when we finally get to the end of ourselves and we go into a place of shock emotionally. And that is finally when we come to Jesus sometimes. And so it's like everything that needs to stop has to stop. And then you can receive rest from the Lord. I don't know how that lands theologically. All I know is that Jesus promises us rest if we come to him. Amen? So his job is to give us power. That's to the faint. And to him who has no might, he increases strength. So he's the one who gives it to us. Our job is to wait for the Lord. And to wait for the Lord does not mean like, come on. I don't know if I grew up in the islands in Hawaii, and waiting is a culture. It's just, you just wait, because no one is ever on time, and that is on time. And so for me, I was just like, oh my goodness, no one ever is on time anywhere. So I just adjusted too, like, okay, we'll be there in an hour, maybe. And so it's this sense of waiting that was more like a frustration. And I think that's what we think about waiting on God. You are late, you are not doing what I've asked and what I need, and do not see me or hear me, do not care. And meanwhile, God is trying to teach us that waiting is actually an act of expectation. So flip your thinking from waiting and somebody being late to recognizing you're anticipating the coming of a loved one. You're anticipating the answer of a prayer that is God's will, not your will. And it's like at the airport. I cry at every reunion. Bill knows he'll put on reunion shows and I'll just cry right through them. I love airports and dislike them for all the same reasons. I love hellos and I do not like goodbyes. They make me cry every time, even if I don't even know the people. I'll be like, oh. You know, I'll rewatch The Military Coming Home over and over again because it's just so touching to me. I love that. I love reunions of joy and coming back together. And so recognizing that we're waiting for the Lord is an expectation. It is an act of expectation for the Lord. And in that waiting, he promises that he will renew our strength. That time of waiting is not wasted time. It is not him being late. It is you restoring your soul, the Lord restoring your soul for you, you resting and waiting in expectation for God's good things. Amen? So I was reading, actually Taylor was telling me about Hinds Feet on High Places. Have any of you ever read that book? It's an old book, Hinds Feet on High Places. Oh, well, see, you'll also need to read it. It is so good. It's an allegory, and it's just so encouraging. It talks about how this girl, her name is Much Afraid. I think we can all identify with her at some level. And she is going through a journey, and it's the journey of her life. And along the way, she experiences suffering and sorrow, and those become her two friends that walk with her through this journey. And she comes to a place where she has endured everything. She has come to the end of herself. She's done everything in her own strength. And finally, she comes to the edge of this huge chasm on her journey. And she is ultimately trying to get to this place of doing God's will. And she comes to the edge and she says to her friends, suffering and sorrow, how are we going to get across? And they say, the only way is to jump down in faith. And Much Afraid is just so faint by now and so weakened that she doesn't even have the strength to do that. And so she is held up by suffering and sorrow, which again, this is a struggle for us who don't believe we should ever suffer or have suffering or sorrow. You know what I mean? And so, but we do, right? We have all gone through some sense of suffering, and we all walk with some sense of sorrow at some point in our lives. And this is where she found herself. She didn't know how to get to that place of God's will. And so finally she leaned on suffering and she leaned on sorrow, and together they jumped in faith. And they landed, no one was injured. They get to the bottom, and she's come to the place of her, basically of the altar. It's this place where she sees that, oh, this is where I'm to make the sacrifice, to the high priest. And she cries out to God, where are you? I need you. And she says to suffering and sorrow, I can't make this sacrifice alone. Can you please help me? I'm too tired. And within her has grown this root that she needs to be removed. And do you know what the root is? Human love and self-righteousness. The work that she has done, she's come to the end of, and it's now grown a root of anguish and despair that has gone to every fiber and wrapped around every part of her being. And she needs this root to be removed, and she says to suffering and sorrow, can you please help me remove this? This is my final act of obedience to God, and I finally need to be able to be rid of this anguish. Can you please help me to take out this human love? And they shook their head and said, no, we can't take you there. Only the priest can do that. And she cried out to God, and he was not there. And I feel like, have you ever come to the end of yourself and you cry out to God only to silence? And you feel like, and this, I know that sounds terrible. Is God absent? Is he ignoring you? No. But he's waiting because he knows that only he can remove these things from us. And so finally, when she says, I've come to the altar where I will choose and I only desire to do God's will. I only want to do the will of my master. And that is when the priest of the altar reveals himself out of the mist, and he comes out of obscurity and he says, I'm the priest of this altar. And I see that you want that root removed from your heart. And I can help you with that. Would you like me to help you? And Much Afraid says, yes, I would, but would you please bind me to the altar, because I don't want to be found struggling in the midst of doing your will. And so she says, you bind me to the altar so that you can remove this thing that is anguish, that is the end of myself. I've done everything in my own willpower. I have already reached the end of human love, and now it's just turned into this thing that I'm just bound to. And so he says, I will do that. And he binds her to the altar, and he digs down in, and he rips out that root, and you hear a tearing. And as soon as it's out, then there's like this fire that consumes and pulls all of it to ashes, including suffering and sorrow, gone. And then he lifted her, Much Afraid, off of that table and says basically that you've been standing on the edge. You don't have your hinds feet, and you're on the edge of high places. And now you can have that, because he imparted to her his eternal love, his unconditional love. It's not something she has to do with willpower. It's not something she had to come up with in her own strength to rid herself of anguish. But he placed in her his love, and his will was ultimately done in her. But it wasn't until she was fully submitted. Will you stand with me as I pray with you? And I want to tell you just a quick illustration. You know, this is just a glass of water. It's probably about, feels like maybe a pound, maybe less. And it's not heavy. It is not burdensome. But if I stood here even for 10 minutes and tried to hold it like this, you've heard this illustration. It might be redundant to you, but I'm going to say it again because it's powerful. And over time, it would begin to shake. And then it would begin to spill. And then it would fall, and it would crash into a million pieces. And aren't we doing that in our own strength? We're trying to hold ourselves up. We're trying to hold up God's will even. We're trying to do all these things in our own strength. We're trying to get rest. Trying to take it because no one will give it to us. And in reality, Jesus is saying, come to me. Put it down. It's not meant to be yours to carry. So come to Jesus. Not the concept, not the philosophy, not your sister, not your neighbor. You come to Jesus this morning and dwell in his house. Return to the house of the Lord and abide in him. And then wait upon the Lord. Wait with expectation. I had about 2 months ago, I had 2 major burdens that I was carrying. In fact, my shoulders were just up like this. I could feel it. 2 major things that I've been carrying and feeling like, oh, I just can't get, if I could just get these 2 things under control, which I had no control over, my life would be so much easier and I could breathe so much lighter. And so I realized that this is years. This has been years of me going, God, we need this. If you want us to do your will, you're going to have to give us stuff. And I'm carrying this, and it's heavy, and I'm tired. And I'm just praying about it and praying about it. But I'm really, really just striving about it because I'm worrying about it more than I'm actually going to Jesus. So a couple months ago, I finally decided, you know what? These 2 things, this one, not as long, but still as heavy. God, please just bring this to an end. Surprise me, bring it out of the blue, and please just finish this. And also this, if you really have called us here to do your will, and there's still more to do, then these are the things we need. And if you agree, and this is in your will, then will you please provide it now? Because we're ready. And then guess what I did? I did not pick it up again. In 1 week, only noticing this in hindsight, in 1 week, got an email. This one, the lighter one. Okay, there's signs that it's coming to an end. Big signs. Same week, get a text. Just an idea, just a thought. Now, it's the fulfillment of the prayer and the promise. It's done. Years of praying, more than 10 years of praying for that one. And it's done. Because I finally came to Jesus and said, you know what? If this is your will, please just take it. Bind me to the altar of your will, because I know I'll be found struggling through it. And it's kind of a struggle, I'm not gonna lie. It's change, it's adjusting to new things. But it's God's will and it's amazing. So bow your heads and step back against your seats. And I'm gonna call you to Jesus. This altar is a place for you to picture in your mind who Jesus is to you. And he's standing here and he's saying, come to me, dwell in my house forever, and wait upon the Lord. Father, right now, as people are coming, Lord, I pray that you would draw them to yourself, that you would touch them, that you would heal them, that you would